że rzeczywiście dzisiaj jest tak, że jeszcze cały szereg państw nie wydaje 2% na obronność i bardzo liczę na to, że ta propozycja właśnie spowoduje zwiększenie ciśnienia na te państwa, żeby rzeczywiście jak najszybciej ten poziom wydatków obronnych podniosły, tak żeby nie było więcej takich rozmów, jak niedawno prowadziliśmy, gdzie mówimy, trzeba dzisiaj pomóc Ukrainie, trzeba wysłać amunicję na Ukrainę, a przywódcy rozkładają ręce i mówią, no tak, ale my nie mamy amunicji, no tak, ale my nie mamy produkcji, no tak, ale my nie jesteśmy w stanie wykonać pewnych naszych zobowiązań, które podjęliśmy na kolejnych szczytach NATO, bo dzisiaj nie mamy zasobów.
At the same time, the European Commission distributed funds for arms contracts, and the division well defines the real distribution of forces within the European Union. Germany and France received the lion's share of this budget. In total, that's about 70% of the funds. Poland received from this budget 0.41%, less than 0.5%. In absolute numbers, this amounts to about 2.1 million euros out of 500 million that were available for distribution. Regardless of what ministers from Polish government of Donald Tusk will claim, trying to shift the blame for this defeat onto their predecessors from PIS party that they don't like, it clearly shows what the real political strength of Poland looks like in confrontation with the political tandem of Paris and Berlin. It's worth noting on this occasion how much money for armaments President Andrzej Duda brought to Poland from the USA on the same day, on Friday. As a result of talks that President Duda and earlier the Law and Justice government conducted with Americans, the result of these talks is granting Poland a credit line of $2 billion, lightly counting 1,000 times more than Tusk received in Berlin from Scholz and Macron. It's also worth mentioning that the credit line for purchasing this armament means the most modern attack helicopters Apache and the most modern tanks in the world, which are Abrams.
Słyszeliśmy to, co było dla nas najważniejsze, czyli że jest zgoda na sprzedaż śmigłowców Apache dla Polski, że jest wsparcie amerykańskie w postaci $2 miliardów w tym zakupie. To są dla nas najważniejsze informacje, że mamy zgodę na zakup kolejnych bardzo ważnych elementów wzmacniających bezpieczeństwo militarne Polski. Mówimy choćby o JASM-ach, więc to są informacje dla naszego bezpieczeństwa absolutnie kluczowe, jeżeli chodzi o nowoczesne środki obrony i to jest dzisiaj najważniejsze, bo my przyjechaliśmy tutaj w sprawach bezpieczeństwa Rzeczypospolitej. To jest dla nas sprawa absolutnie podstawowa. Natomiast oczywiście, że elementem tego bezpieczeństwa jest to, by agresja rosyjska została na Ukrainie zatrzymana, by ta agresja nie poszła dalej.
However, the most important conclusion for us, Poles and other nations in Central Europe, boils down to the simple fact. European leaders from Paris and Berlin have at best a pat on the back ready for the Polish Prime Minister at a press conference after decisions are made. Because the only value the Polish Prime Minister has for them is the ability to hinder the building of an American-Polish agreement, alliance. Tusk is only needed for this, as German media wrote, he is easy to cultivate and will subordinate himself to the stronger for personal career promises, just as he did during the Berlin-ordered reset policy he led when he was Prime Minister for the first time, which opened the door for him to be a president of the European Union with Angela Merkel's blessing. The consequences of such a state of affairs for our security in the region could be dire. Poland must rely on itself and purchase arms from trusted partners with whom we share strategic interests. And unlike Germany or France, the USA is interested in containing Russian imperialism and needs partners for this: Poland, Ukraine, Baltic states, Romania, Czech Republic. Our historical and geopolitical experiences show that when push comes to shove, the weapons, shells, and jet fighters purchased from France in August, just before the Second World War started in 1939, even loaded onto Polish ships in French ports somehow didn't arrive in our ports to this day. In a way, we here in Central Europe still wait for them to be delivered. Those kind of lessons from a history should be taught. And that's what we are going to talk about on my show. My name is Michał Rachon. This is Rachon. And we Rollin. Haha. By the way, that's our Substack. You can find us on rachon.com and you can leave us your email as we report from the front lines of the ongoing war against the West. My name is Michał Rachon. This is Rachon. And we roll in again.
Are you ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
Well, we haven't been here for a while because of our traveling to the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. However, things are going on still on this side of the ocean, as we discussed in our first segment of this program. Joe Lindsley is again on Monday on Rachon. Joe, great to see you again. Well, looks like Emmanuel Macron is projecting his political ideas, and it got something to do with the future of Ukraine. Your take on what we have found out over the span of the last few days?
Yeah, Michał, hello from Kharkiv, 30 miles from Russia, a place where at any moment missiles could hit, but still it's a place where you see the possibility of victory, because the city is really, every time I come here, it's coming back to life more and more and more. And I think when I when I watched and read the transcript of Macron's interview from last Thursday, you see someone who now believes in the possibility of victory. And we really see character development. If the Elysee Palace the preceding week had released video of a phone call between Zelensky and Macron that first terrifying, confusing day of the full-scale invasion. And if you look at Macron's actions and behavior, especially those first months of the big invasion, seemed to be scared. He was calling for negotiation. He even mentioned that maybe Crimea, could be given to Russia. And you see a different Macron in that interview on Thursday. And we see character development, just as we've seen with Zelensky, and as I've seen with everyone around me here in the war, someone who has found a new level of courage in saying that we can actually fix this. And the three notable things that he said not only that Russia must lose, but that losing for Russia and winning for Ukraine must include the fact that Crimea returns to Ukraine. He said this is essential. He also said there are too many limits in our vocabulary. He said, we said 2 years ago we would never send tanks. We did. 2 years ago we said we would never send medium-range missiles. We did. And each time he's pushing this idea that the West should be drawing red lines for Russia and not listening to Russia's red lines. And then I think the most profound thing that he said was a moment of confidence and creating the strategic ambiguity in the face of Russia. He reminded, I think in many ways he was speaking directly to the French people, but he said, we should above all feel protected because we are a nuclear power. We are ready. We have a doctrine. And this is, yes, indeed, the West has nukes, and we don't have to sit in fear of Russia always making these threats. And as a sign of how powerful Macron's words were, words must be followed by actions, but he's put himself in a corner in the sense that he needs to follow this with actions because his words were so clear and so tough. And it actually, people were happy. They were saying Vive la France throughout Ukraine. It really had an impact. But then if you look at Russian propaganda, Russian propaganda has been going nuts over Macron, even to the fact, to the level of Candace Owens in the United States released a 20-minute video with bizarre allegations against Macron's wife. And so we see the propaganda is ready to pounce.
Joe, I wonder what is the way that you read those words, because it's not only the interview that you are mentioning, but there are claims, several claims made by the French president over the span of those last few, I would say even last 2 weeks, that France, or at least French president, doesn't rule out the presence of troops, Western troops, on territory of Ukraine. What is your assessment of the meaning of those words? Because I do read those words as a kind of a political poker game, and it's not a poker game against the former Soviet Union, against Russia, because it looks like raising stakes in a geopolitical duel or geopolitical rivalry between Europe and United States. And that's my takeaway from the travel to your original side of Atlantic Ocean. We've spent there a week. Polish president was talking to not only to U.S. president but also to leaders of both parties on Capitol Hill. And I wonder, isn't it the thing that the France is trying to fulfill what they perceive as a kind of geopolitical void that was created by halting this $60 billion Ukraine aid that is halted right now in the Congress?
Surely, I mean, there's always, in politics, you're always going to have politics, politicking involved. Politicians can see an opportunity to step in, to avoid and be the leader. But that also requires some courage and some gumption. And again, the proof will be in, will there be actions that will follow this up? But if you compare in that same, last week, Macron's words and the words of the White House, specifically Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, when he said, oh, by the way, we found $300 million worth of weapons that we can send after all these months. I mean, what we've been saying for a long time, the White House has things that they can do without further permission from Congress that they were not doing. Strangely, they waited till after the State of the Union address to announce it. But when you read Sullivan's statement, it doesn't project strength for 1 second. It's very narrow-minded politically because it's focusing only on blaming the Republicans who are holding up that aid package. But it doesn't say Putin, we're going to do everything we can to help win. It's very negatively couched, saying things are going to be dire if the Republicans don't step up. But then meanwhile, the White House, is showing that they can find weapons and they can send them here. They announced that they would send the ATACMS. It's unclear whether or not it's medium or long range. But that action could have projected strength, but it was couched in the weakest possible language. And so Macron sort of is. And not just Macron, but other, especially Baltic leaders and others are stepping in to the void. Surely there's a lot of political maneuvering there. But I think what we see, and this is the very reason, Michal, why I'm here in Kharkiv, is I came here to deliver jammers to protect the Ukrainians from drones. But I'm also here because this city shows that the impossible is possible. It shows that, like here, I just was for a run yesterday, and a cafe that was bombed by Russian-Iranian suicide drone and totally destroyed is reopened and crowded, full of people. This shows every single day here in this city, I see people proving that the victory is a process. And I realized this, like listening to Macron, and then when I was traveling through Donbass over the weekend, too often we're speaking about Ukraine like it is a European football game, what we would call a soccer game, where there's lots of activity and no one quite knows who has the momentum during the game. But we need to think of it more as an American football game where you can see on the field progress. You can first down, second down, third down. You can look at the field and you can see these small victories that lead to the bigger victory. And that's exactly the situation we have. And I think finally someone like Macron is realizing that. Look at the Ukrainian success in the Black Sea, destroying, every couple of weeks a new Russian ship becomes a submarine. We've had a huge decrease in Russian naval activity in the Black Sea. look at Ukrainian success in the sky, taking out Russian jets.
Yeah, but
and then look,
I wonder
look at this.
what is the reason for which because and I mentioned it in my opening monologue last year, and we actually talked about those Atacams being available for to send them to Ukraine. I think that Jeff Fisher on our program was talking about it. I think in late October, in mid-October, after one of the meetings in Washington, D.C., that there is a way of sending the missiles that are technically out of date, but they're fully operational and they can be used without any complicated procedures that are needed in other circumstances. So it doesn't surprise me that the U.S. government, that the White House claims that there is a possibility of sending some kind of military aid. But on the other hand, we have Emmanuel Macron, the same political leader who, when Ukraine was having their first successes and kicking Ruskies out of the vast majority of the Ukrainian territory was a huge military success in the first phase of war. He wasn't he wasn't among those hawks who were claiming that there is some kind of physical presence of Western troops in Ukraine needed. Actually, when Polish Vice Prime Minister Jarosław Kaczyński said something about the peacekeeping troops, he was bashed by the allies that no one can say this kind of things. And now we are in the third year of war, and out of nowhere, Emmanuel Macron claims that this is a need. And I definitely agree with him. But my question is, why so late?
Well, I think, we could dwell on why so late, but I think we're in a phase now where, it's a combination of people realizing that Russia, we have 2 years of evidence of how evil and sick Russia is. For example, hours after Macron's interview, they sent 2 missiles. The Russians sent 2 missiles to the city of Odessa, and the second missile was timed for right when the rescue workers arrived. And so we have all this evidence, but then I think that the key thing is that it's not enough to see Russian atrocities. You have to see that, whoa, this could work. And for too long, we had this idea of victory like the end of the game, or the national championship. And how do you get there? It seemed impossible. We can make tiny little gains, but it just how do we define it? Breakup of Russian Federation, return of Crimea. And when you think like that, you get overwhelmed. It's like you're trying to go up a mountain and you lose your footing. And so what I've seen a shift, and I think Ukrainians have helped show that this is possible by this methodical, week by week destruction of Russian ships and of Russian planes, and by Russia's second annual failed winter offensive. This winter was so much better in Ukraine than
Joe,
last
except you, probably no one is talking about the failed Russian winter offensive.
Yeah, there's not many talking about it, but I keep insisting on it, but certainly more and more people are aware of it, and it's a fact that things are better than they were in many ways. Now it's still terrible at the front. In fact, I was in Kramatorsk and other places over the weekend, and when I talked to the guys there, the Russians are. People told me that Russians are attacking with chemical drones. So drones are dropping chemicals. I know people who've gotten sick from that. And the Ukrainians do not have enough ammunition. This is why it is encouraging as we see this awakening in Europe. The president of Czech Republic, the Czechs they said they have 800,000 rounds of artillery ammunition they can get here. And then with additional funding, maybe 700,000 more. So we're starting to see, once people start to see that, step by step, that we can get these small victories, I think that it starts to open things up and to make people believe again in the possibility. The first year of the full-scale war, the support for Ukraine was driven by pity and sympathy, saying this is awful and we have to stop it. But then I think people got a bit broken by it and said, either bored or broken. They said, this is so awful, how can we possibly stop it? Or simply they tuned out. But now the key is, and this is what we're starting to see that is actually working, is if Ukraine can say, look, step by step, we can prove that we can turn this around. it's a hell of a fight, but we've got a lot of positive things to say. And again, that's why I'm here in this city. If you were anyone who was starting to feel weak about Ukraine and to be scared of Russia, come to this city. And it's scary when you first, get off the train. You get a sick feeling in your gut, knowing at any moment a missile could strike. But then when you see traffic and places reopening and new businesses starting and kids playing in the park and people cheerfully going on with their lives, you see that this is 30 miles from Russia. This city is largely unprotected. No air defense like Kyiv has. And yet it is full of life and defiance.
Okay, Joe, I wonder, because as we speak about the proximity of the Russian border, last week was also a series, we witnessed or we've heard about a series of events that we remember from the previous phases of wars, another incursions on the territory of Russia, another attempts of attacking Russia on Russian territory. Those things were happening as Vladimir Putler was preparing for election, which made him, what a surprise, a president of this criminal state for another term. What do you make of those incursions and informations about wartime activities on the territory of Russia?
Well, it's hard to get good information on what exactly has happened. We did have some good evidence that, FSB, Russian intel office was attacked in the border villages. Russians did flee, and you did see the Freedom for Russia Legion flag within the Russian Federation. This happened about a year ago. It was last May. A similar incursion. Nothing came of it. So perhaps it was, just a way to poke the bear to test things. But I know that, what those guys are doing, that was pretty public, but there's always attempts to do that. This is something they're always working on, and it does reveal Russian weaknesses, on those borders, and maybe, there's some hope, and some experts say that the Russians would have to move troops away from places like Kupiansk and down in Donbass and move them up to the north. But maybe all this is just while Ukraine has to, in the same way that Macron was ambiguous about whether or not he would send troops. You have to keep your enemy guessing and find the weak spots and keep poking while you're waiting to get long-range weapons where you can actually attack the basis from which Russia launches its attacks upon Ukraine, and then to make the people in that region, this gets so misreported. The headline at the BBC after this incursion, is focused on, war now. It misses the fact that Russian cities and villages near the border have not experienced war for these 2 years. They might have heard distant sounds, but they have, and I don't think a lot of people realize this. Ukrainian cities are bombed and shelled every night and every day, and the Russians, a kilometer away across the border, are fine and safe.
Know nothing about
except for this past weekend.
Well, and the Western countries that are supporting Ukraine from the very beginning made it quite clear that they do not want Ukraine to attack Russia on Russian territory, which makes this war a kind of, if we are in sporting comparisons, a kind of a duel of two boxers, a fight of two boxers, but one of them is allowed to punch only, for example, with his one hand. We can compare it to this kind of situation, and this is the one who is weaker and lighter in a way. Joe, we got about 1 minute, so brief report on fundraising. What our viewers can do to support Ukraine fighting against Russian aggression, helping your organization.
Well, our team, Ukrainian Freedom News, we just delivered a batch of drone jamming backpacks, incredible technology made here in Ukraine. We had generous American supporters paid for this, and one soldier wears the backpack, and it can protect about a dozen guys from incoming Russian FPV drones. Each one is about $2,500, but they last long. They protect the guys. And we really realize it's one of the, while, anyone who cares about Ukraine, while pushing for Washington to approve long-range weapons. So it's not just the Republicans. Get the Republicans to agree to funding for the government in Ukraine to keep it going. Get the Democrats to agree to send long-range weapons. But meanwhile, regular people around America can send money. We welcome donations at UkrainianFreedomNews.com. And we are focused now on buying drone jamming backpacks to protect Ukrainians while they're doing their work, search and rescue, evacuation, and pushing back against the Russians. I ran into a friend in Donbass. It's amazing how you run into people in the war who's a Ukrainian warrior. He previously was a chef, and he said, artillery and gunfire, they don't bother me. We know how to I can react to that. I can fight back against that. But the thing that terrifies me are the FPV drones, because once that is locked on you, it's not a good situation. And that's why the more we can get, and there's a lot of people around Ukraine working on this, but getting these drone jammers to Ukrainians, it saves lives and it lets them do their work without getting attacked by these Russian FPV drones. So UkrainianFreedomNews.com, and I hope in 2 weeks to be able to do another delivery of these backpacks.
So we are keeping our fingers crossed. Our viewers proved many times over the span of those almost 3 years or 2 years and months of this war that they can support the real effort of fighting Ruskies and kicking them out of territory of sovereign country, sovereign state of Ukraine. And Joe is the man who helps in providing this aid over there right now from the city 30 kilometers from the border of Russia. Joe, thank you very much. We see each other next week. Stay safe.
Michał, dziękuję. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can leave us your email here on our website, rackracon.com. We try to send you reports on the most important events of the war, the ongoing war against the West that we report on this program. So, see you tomorrow. Stay safe. Ciao, ciao. Bye.